For the past few years, I have grown a huge interest in Islam, mainly because of the denial of Jesus' death on the cross. That's really big because there are billions of Muslims in the world today. I clearly don't have enough time to make these large persuasive arguments, but I do hope that this spurs healthy conversation. Now, I believe in the crucifixion of Christ logically, using the historical method, and biblically, Jesus had to die in order for sin to be properly atoned for. Using the historical method, here's what we have to avoid. We cannot presuppose a belief that we already have. We have to first test out all known information about a certain topic and then weigh out the competing theories. Essentially, we have to be fair. Since none of us were there when it happened, we cannot 100% prove it based off of our own accounts. So the next best thing is finding the best plausible explanation. So here's our question. What best explains the crucifixion of Christ? We'll use the Islamic perspective and then the Christian perspective. Okay, so Islam's only measure of proof is the Quran, using Surah 4:157. Fair enough. But using the historical method, there is no supporting historical evidence outside of the Quran for Muslims. Their belief is based off of the words of Muhammad, who lived 600 years after the events of the crucifixion and who was born and raised nowhere near where these events took place. Here's the crazy part. Known scholars, both religious and non-religious, testify that Jesus did in fact die on the cross. It is a historical event. It is pretty much universally agreed upon that Jesus historically did die on the cross. And so why is this so important? Because if Jesus didn't die on the cross, then our belief as Christians is in vain. Which leads us to our next point. The Bible is not just a religious text, though it is also a historical text on first century Christianity. Support for the crucifixion is evident throughout the entire New Testament, which is also a historical document. Now, here's a common method that I've seen Muslims use in conversations that I've had. They would take a verse to say that the Bible even says that Jesus didn't die on the cross. For example, when Jesus prays in the garden, "Let this cup pass from me," they say Jesus didn't want to die and God would honor what Jesus would pray. But in doing so, they fail to acknowledge the plenty of other verses that acknowledge Jesus actually saying, "I will die and I will raise again from the grave." So that's logically. But I also believe in the crucifixion biblically. In other words, it makes sense that Jesus had to die on the cross. Here's a common argument against this that I've seen used. People would say, God didn't have to kill Jesus in order to forgive sin. He could have just said, "I forgive you," and it would have worked. Sure, but against this argument, we can biblically say that God would not have been just if he were to do so. Throughout all of Scripture, there is a common theme of sacrifice for sin. Something had to die in order for sin to be paid for and for it to be justly removed. And clearly, humanity could not justify themselves before God by paying for their own sin. So there had to be someone perfect enough to be the perfect sacrifice and someone human enough to use his own flesh to do so. So we have God becoming flesh and using his own body to die for sin.